Hello and welcome to today's episode of Money Talk with Skyler Fleming. In today's episode, we're going to be talking all about credit card debt with Kenny Golde. He found himself in over $200,000 worth of credit card debt with over $4,000 in monthly payments. I cannot imagine how stressful that must have been, but he found his way out of it. And his passion now is to share that with everyone else, to empower others to get out of their own credit card debt. And we have a fantastic conversation coming up today with some very actionable takeaways. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. But I wanted to give a huge shout out to all the new listeners that have come aboard the Money Talk with Skyler Fleming train. We've been shattering listenership records over the past few weeks, and that's because of great people like you listening and sharing this episode. We can continue to spread the conversation and have more and more money talks. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, please share it with a friend and then have a money talk about it. If you have any feedback, thoughts, or questions from today's episode, please email me at moneytalk@skylerfleming.com. You can also find my email in the show notes. Quick shout out to I Love to Eat Veggies for their review on Apple Podcasts. Skyler has genuine conversations with extraordinary guests about practical life lessons. You learn something in every episode. It's a must listen. Thank you to everyone leaving reviews. And if you could please leave me a 5-star review, I would very much appreciate that. The money talking points for today's episode are: what financial situation do you find yourself in that could benefit from a new perspective? And 2, why is it important to avoid credit card debt? With the money talking points in mind, let's get right into today's episode. You know, we don't talk about money enough. It's a topic that gets ignored for some reason, even though it plays a role in everyone's day-to-day life. Well, this issue is what brought Money Talk with Skyler Fleming to reality. I know you're probably busy and don't have time to research and learn about all the things that go into personal finance, but that's where this podcast, Money Talk with Skyler Fleming, comes into play. I'm your host, Skyler Fleming. I'm here to do the research and learn all the extra stuff about personal finance. The goal is just to simply get us talking about money. So let's get talking. Welcome to another episode here. I have Ken with me, and Ken is all about debt reduction. Is that right, Ken? Will you go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about how you got into this area?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. So my name's Kenny Golde, and about 15 years ago, my background is in film production. I was a film director for many, many years and a film writer. I was shooting a movie in 2007, and sort of all at the same time, my business partner passed away, which held up the financing of the movie, which left me with a lot of money out on credit cards, which I didn't think was going to be a huge problem because I'd made and sold films before. I figured we would just finish it and sell it, and I'd pay off the loans for the film. But that fall, the subprime mortgage crisis hit, and the next spring, the 2008 market crash hit, and films just weren't selling, and the business model just turned upside down on its head. And I got left with a lot of credit card debt, well over $200,000 in credit card debt that I was never expecting, that I had no idea how I was going to pay off. I mean, the idea, I was paying almost $4,000 a month in monthly payments. Most of that was interest. I was really rushing head on towards bankruptcy. I actually went to a bankruptcy attorney to figure out what my options were. And for the first time ever, this was like 2008, this bankruptcy attorney told me about debt settlement, that you can call up a credit card company or a bank and negotiate a payment for less than you owe on your balance. I'd never heard of it. These days, 15 years later, you hear all the debt relief agencies advertising on television and the radio all the time. At the time, there was no information. So I just started doing it myself, and I wound up doing really well. I had well over 150, almost $200,000 in debt written off entirely. I learned all of the ins and outs and tips and tricks and everything one could possibly know about debt settlement, and wound up writing a book about it, my first book called the Do It Yourself Bailout. And that's led to this 15-year journey of just being really, really dedicated to helping people learn how to get themselves out of debt quickly and way less expensively than the routes they traditionally think of.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a roller coaster, just even like listening to it, going from that much credit card debt to thinking you'll be okay. And then unforeseen circumstances happen and you're like, we are not okay. Like there's just a lot going on there.
Yeah. You know, it's funny being in the debt settlement world, notwithstanding the fact that there are companies, debt settlement agencies that make a lot of money settling out people's debt, negotiating for them. You still get a lot of people out there who want to judge debt settlement. They come from that historical, emotional place of you have to pay off all your debts. You have to pay off everything you borrowed. And statistically, most people who get into troublesome credit card debt do not get there through poor spending and saving habits. Just the stats don't support that the average person in credit card debt is just spending more than they earn. When you looked at the 2008 market crash, credit card defaults tripled in the couple of years after the market crash. And the same thing happened again after COVID. In fact, credit card, I think I saw an article last year from USA Today that something like 1 out of 2 people were using credit cards for basic living expenses during COVID, which is not what they're intended for. So the national credit card debt's reaching $1 trillion. Most people don't get there because they're just not paying attention to their finances. Most people get there because unforeseen things happen. A business goes under, the market crash, COVID, you're unemployed for 2 years, you get injured, you now can't work, or medical debt or divorce. People find themselves struggling with debt through circumstances they didn't predict, not through anything foreseeable.
I really like that, kind of to set the stage a little bit for this conversation, is that like, let's remove the judgment of debt settlement and maybe not think of it, because I think maybe some people think of that people are just trying to get a handout or something like that. But instead, like you just framed it, it's more of something that people find themselves in a situation where, like, who wants to be there? Who wants to be buried by that much credit card debt, if we're being realistic? So I like this approach of like, let's reduce the judgment around settlement and like go at it. But I also like your idea of the do it yourself. I like the idea of do it yourself. And we've talked a little bit about like that weight. I think from what I was understanding, like I would imagine you felt the weight of all that credit card debt when that was happening. Why is it important to get out of credit card debt?
Well, I mean, there's all sorts of reasons to not be in credit card debt. The most tangible, obvious one is just we all work very hard in our lives for our income. We want to be able to put our income toward our lives. And having to put your income, sometimes 25, 30, 40% of your income towards credit card debt is both financially beyond encumbering. It can really be devastating for people, but even more so, it's emotionally devastating. We all have emotional attachment to our finances. We all have a certain level of emotions around debt. Severe debt can cause people stress and anxiety. Some people suffer from shame. How did they get here in the first place? From guilt. They judge themselves, their fear of other people judging them. I've had clients who are spouses who hide their debt from their spouses, children hiding, college kids hiding debt from their parents, afraid to tell their parents. This has happened to me. There's so much emotional suffering that can come along with debt that the emotions make it even harder to focus on getting out of the debt. And a lot of people, they want to get out of debt. Most people, I would say, want to get out of debt, not just because financially it makes life easier, put your money towards your expenses, great. But emotionally, people have this notion of, even if they don't express it to themselves this way, they have this notion of, once I'm out of debt, then I can start feeling better about my life. Getting myself out of debt will alleviate the pain and stress and fear, shame, guilt, and anxiety, whatever it is you're feeling. Get out of debt in order to alleviate those emotions. And the thing that I learned really early on was you're actually in a better position to get out of debt if you do the work to let go of the emotions first. And the number one way to let go of the emotions first is to process through all the judgment and all that programming that we get around finance throughout our lives that says, if you're suffering in debt, you're a bad person. People feel like if their credit score falls, they're a bad person. They're more attached to their credit score being high because of what it says about them as a human being than they are to their credit score being high because it has the ability to get them more loans at a lower interest rate. Like, it's this personal identity thing about finance and credit scores and debt that cause people to suffer the loss of that identity. And in all of the work that I do, in my books, in the Do It Yourself Bailout and Debt Reduction Made Easy, in my video courses, in the upcoming coaching course I'll be telling you about, 50% of the information is about how to process through the emotions so that you are in a strong, rational, logical place to deal with getting out of debt. I have this saying, I say, you're the CEO of the corporation of you. And as the CEO of any corporation, you have the right to deal with your finances by the numbers, by any legal means, the same way any business CEO would. Take the emotion out of it and approach it as a business, and you'll do way better for yourself than if you let the emotions drag you down before you even get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic. And my follow-up question was going to be, how can it cripple us financially? But I love where you went with how it can cripple us emotionally, because I think that's honestly more of the topic around money that people need to understand is the emotion, because the math is easy. Like there's calculators. You can plug in percentages or whatever and figure out what you should be paying off quickest and things like that. The math, it is math. But I always like to say money is more than math, because if it was just math, it would be simple. We'd have just it calculated out perfectly. We would know what to do. But I like what you said, it can cripple us emotionally. And that's really, I think, a key starting point. And to get into it a little bit more, to maybe get into the nuts and bolts of your process and dealing with credit card debt, where can people start with credit card debt? You mentioned figure out the emotional side of it and figure out how to handle those emotions and process that. But where else can people get started with credit card debt?
One of the big things I talk about often in all of my work is knowledge. Starting with knowledge, starting with educating yourself. When you think about it, when you're in debt, your bank is not your partner. Banks want you to think they're your partner. They advertise on that level, like, be our partner. We're going to work together. But your bank is not your partner. And you're really not even their customer. You're an adversary to your bank when you're in debt. Your goal is to get out of debt, and their goal is to keep you in debt. Notwithstanding what their advertising is and all the montages of smiling people running around affording vacations that they can't afford, your bank's business model is to keep you in debt. If your bank's not keeping you in debt, they are not performing their business's function. And your business model, if you're in debt, is to get out of debt as quickly and inexpensively as possible. So your bank is actually your adversary in this situation, not your partner. So the first thing to do if you're really struggling with debt is to get educated. In my work, I talk about 5 or 6 ways to get out of debt. I categorize them. I really educate people into what each of them are. One is what I call long-term payoff. And there are many, many, many different forms of long-term payoff. The most obvious and usual one is just make that minimum monthly payment every month at full interest for 10 or 20 years, and you'll eventually get out of debt. That's a form of long-term payoff. There's some great people out there with great models for long-term payoff. The snowball method of paying the lowest balance first and then the next one and bulking your payments together. There are numerous methods. They're all forms of long-term payoff. Debt consolidation, where you take out a jumbo loan to take your various accounts and put them under one account at a hopefully lower interest rate and lower monthly payment, is good. It's financial. It brings the numbers down, but it's still a form of long-term payoff. Another form is filing bankruptcy. We all know what bankruptcy is. If you don't know how bankruptcy works, go talk to a bankruptcy attorney. Take their couple $100 introductory hour and ask all the questions that you have about what is bankruptcy. Another form is just running from it. You'd be surprised how many clients I get who just ignore their debt. I don't recommend it. It's the one I say don't do. It's the one that has the worst tailspin that comes after it. But a lot of people, they get so caught up in the emotions that when the debt collectors start to call, they just don't take the calls. And a couple of years go by and they find out that they got sued 9 months ago and didn't even know it because they didn't open their mail. But that is a form. It's just avoid your debt. And then there's settlement, which is the process of calling up your bank and saying, whatever your story is, for whatever these reasons are, this isn't manageable to me anymore. The reason that bankruptcy laws were created is because the government understood that banks are in the business of getting people into debt and sometimes do it in a way that gets people into a situation that they can't manage. The same thing with debt settlement. Every bank, every lender, every credit card company has a department that will negotiate settlements on debt, but they have a lot of rules and regulations and information that if you don't know that information, you're going to be at a disadvantage. That's where debt settlement agencies come in. They want people to think that they have the secret sauce to calling up banks and lenders and getting banks and lenders to give them lower settlements on debt than somebody can get on their own. From my point of view, it's just not true. We can run the numbers, but I believe that using a debt settlement agency on average will cost somebody twice as much as if they settle debt on their own. Everybody has the right to call up their bank directly and negotiate a settlement on your debt. You can save twice as much money over using a debt settlement agency. I'll take you through those numbers in a second. You just need the knowledge. You want to have a light on that dark tunnel. So you're not going into, business negotiations with a bank who's so more skilled and knowledgeable about the process than you are. You're just going to lose. So educate yourself and go in like that CEO of the corporation of you with all the information you have so that you can succeed.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Get educated. Have a talk with someone, whether it's you or have a talk with maybe a friend and say, hey, I'm just feeling the weight of this debt. How have you got out of debt before? Like I would say start talking about it with somebody so that you can say, hey, this is what I'm feeling. That's one way you can process the emotions, is just share them with someone and don't bottle them up and run from your debt. Like you said, just start a conversation is what I would say. And then next, if you're feeling that overwhelming feeling and say you're just running away from your credit card debt and you don't feel like you can ever get out of it, what if someone feels like that? What if they are feeling that like heavy emotion of, say, $200,000 in credit card debt?
Look, I mean, I get emotional when I talk about it. It can be devastating. It can be really devastating to either, if you're trying to stay current on those kind of payments and it's just so hard that you're making choices between making your credit card payment or paying your rent, making your credit card payment or buying food or putting gas in your car with interest rates up and inflation up right now. People who were even people after COVID whose business model was working and then interest rates spiked and suddenly their variable interest rate credit card where they were paying X dollars a month and it was fitting in their budget, their payments have now tripled and it's all interest. It's not even bringing down the balance. It's all interest. And suddenly now they're in negative cash flow instead of being in positive cash flow because they were managing, they now can't manage and they're making really hard choices. Another article I read last year was that 1 in 6 American households were behind on their utility payments. To have to choose between your electric bill in the summertime and your credit card payment. People just shouldn't have to make those choices. Those emotions can be so devastating. I find that knowledge helps getting over emotion. When you start to educate yourself, things that seemed fearful are suddenly not so fearful anymore because you sort of understand. A lot of people, one reason they'll never miss a credit card payment is because they just think it's wrong, which I've already talked about. Another reason they don't miss a credit card payment is because they don't want their credit score to fall, which I can make a big argument for. If the tool that your credit score is, if its primary tool is to get you more access to credit at a lower interest rate and ultimately save you money, if I could show you how letting your credit score fall by 300 points from 800 to 500 would save you tens of thousands of dollars, if you can use that tool in a different way, why not? So there goes the I don't want to let my credit score fall for financial reasons argument. And another reason people don't want to miss a credit card payment is because they don't want to talk to a debt collector because they grew up with this image of the big bad debt collector who is so horrible to talk to on the phone, and they freeze up at the idea of that conversation. And one of the things I do in my courses is I take you through actual scripts. In fact, that's how I started winning at debt negotiation to begin with, is I was delinquent on like 7 accounts at the same time, getting 6, 7 phone calls a day, terrified to talk to each one of these people who seemed so trained in it. And then I started to notice that no matter which bank it was, they were all saying the same thing. They were all going through the same pattern. And one day it clicked for me, like they've all hired some big, expensive, probably multi-million-dollar consultant to write a script for them that's their, this is the best way to get people in debt to go back on regular payments script. And I thought, well, if they've got that script, if they're treating it like a business, then I can write this is the best way to get a negotiated payment script. The more I started treating it like a business, the more the painful emotions went away. And pretty soon when it started happening the way I wanted it to happen, the fear was replaced by courage. And the anxiety was replaced by confidence. Getting educated and then going into the process and learning more and seeing it succeed made me a confident debt negotiator. And that's what I really provide in the books and the courses. Is my first step is to make you confident in yourself to go create your own financial future, and then give you the steps and tools to go do it successfully.
Awesome. I think this whole conversation has just been an awesome just reframing of like insurmountable debt. You can do it is what I've heard from this. Don't feel the judgment, maybe process that a little bit, but also take away the judgment of a debt settlement. But just to wrap up here, how can people take your approach and help use it to tackle their mounting credit card debt?
So I'm just starting this brand new thing. I first wrote the Do It Yourself Bailout back in 2009 and 2010. And then I got it published and I was on the news a lot and I had a lot of readers. Just the Do It Yourself Bailout is my story. I just kind of go through, this is what happened with each credit card account. I tell my story. And that alone I found was really helpful for people, just hearing that somebody else had been through it and seeing the steps. And then when COVID hit and I started to get all these emails and calls from old readers going, oh my God, COVID, I'm unemployed and I'm living on credit cards and it's here again. Just reaching back out for that sense of encouragement and confidence again. So I wrote a new book. I wrote a book called Debt Reduction Made Easy. The first book, the Do It Yourself Bailout, is my story. The new book is a how-to. It's here are the actual steps that you go through. Boom, 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 boom. You actually write a business plan. I say throughout the book, treat it like a business. In the book, I have you write a business plan for getting yourself out of debt. And then the next thing I did is I created a video course. It's like a 12-hour, 25-module video course where it's me on camera just like this, just like I am with you right now, talking people through each step. So that's available at debtreductionmadeeasy.com. And now I'm starting something new for the first time ever. I'm actually putting together a coaching course where when you sign up for the course, you get the books, you get the video course to watch on your own, like home study. And I'm going to have a weekly group coaching call for everybody who's in the course. I noticed I was getting so many emails and phone calls from people, even as they were going through the process saying, hey, this just happened and this just happened. And what do I do here? And this was a surprise and I'm feeling nervous. How do I handle this? I figured let's give people the opportunity to actually get on a call with me every week and actually get that guidance, that in-person guidance through the process for 6 months. I can virtually guarantee that if you tackle the process within 6 months, you're going to get an offer from your bank to settle your credit card for less, probably 30, 40, 50, 60% less than you owe. And I really want to point out those numbers. To me, on average, within about a year, most settlements come in the 30 to 35% range. Other outliers, I paid 44% on one and 22% on another. So yeah, there are outliers, but for wherever you're at in debt, if you have $50,000 in credit card debt, you could reasonably expect that in a year, you'll settle it for about 17 and not only save that 33,000 up front, you'll save $50,000 in interest you would have paid over the next 10 or 20 years also. I can virtually guarantee that kind of success in the course with me there guiding you through it. So I think I put the link there. Your eyesight's probably better than mine. Can you see the link there?
Yes, I can. And we'll make sure to link it in the show notes as well. But this has all been fantastic. I love just like I said, the reframing of looking at this in a new light and considering maybe what can I do differently? Because like you said, we can be so focused on the image of debt or the image of a high credit score, but maybe sometimes it is the financially best decision to do something different. Like just maybe try it. If you're feeling so overwhelmed by credit card debt, what's the harm in investigating a different approach that could save you money? Like you're saying, it's likely that once you get to that point, they're going to settle with you because they just want to get it off their books. And that could it builds confidence, like you said, as you're doing it more and more, it's saving you money in the long term. But I'd like this just as an overall new approach to a situation that can be really emotionally crippling and financially crippling, like we've been saying. But how can people contact you? Like you mentioned your website. Can you mention that one more time for everybody and then maybe an email address or somewhere they can find you?
Sure. Yeah. So the general website is debtreductionmadeeasy.com. You'll get more information there. There's information on my books and my video courses if you're interested in that. The new online coaching course that I'm doing is going to be at debtreductionmadeeasy.com/course-info. And if you go there, I've got this brand new PDF. I just put it together. It's called the 5 Fatal Mistakes to Avoid to Stay Out of Debt. And so you get that for free if you just go to that website and put in your email address. You'll get that PDF right now that talks about some of the things we've been talking about today. And I'll now have your email address to keep you informed as the course comes up. And then my email is kenny@thedoityourselfbailout.com. So if you just email me at kenny@thedoityourselfbailout.com, I can point you towards my books and my video courses. And if you want to talk about the course itself, we can set a time to do that. I'm passionate. There's almost $1 trillion in national credit card debt. My goal is to cut that in half. I want the national credit card debt to fall by $500 billion because I want people to have their money go towards their lives instead of towards interest to banks. And my whole commitment in life is to make people feel empowered and confident and courageous that they have the ability to go take control of their own financial lives and their own debt. And they can do this. You really can. If I could and my readers can, you can. So go to debtreductionmadeeasy.com or email me, Kenny at the doityourselfbailout.com, and let me show you how I can help you do that for a few $100s instead of the tens of thousands that a debt relief agency will charge you and the tens of thousands more that you'll pay in interest over decades.
Awesome. What a fun conversation that was. What a new approach that I've never really thought of. I've heard of, like you said, settlement agencies that you pay or things like that, but I like this approach of doing it yourself. I like this approach of reframing it and removing the judgment from that credit card debt that you have and take this new approach. So Kenny, thank you so much for coming on. And of course, links will be in the show notes for people to be able to find you and contact you. But I really appreciate you coming on. And this was a fun conversation.
I had fun as well. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I really hope you enjoyed today's interview with Kenny. I thought that was fantastic. What a new way to look at credit card debt. Look at it through the lens of being able to get out of it yourself and be able to overcome that hurdle yourself and save yourself a ton of money. I love the idea of looking at things with a new perspective. Like I said in the money talking points, is there some financial situation that you're currently dealing with that could really benefit from looking at it in a new perspective? I think that's super helpful. And that's where it can be so beneficial to talk to somebody else about money because they can offer you that new perspective. I would have never thought of this perspective to look at credit card debt in the eyes of getting out of it yourself, in the eyes of getting credit card reduction and credit card settlements yourself. That's something that I would have never thought of if I hadn't had this money talk with Kenny. So let's think of it in terms of investing. Maybe you've never looked into index funds because you've never talked to someone about them. Or let's look at it in terms of budgeting. Maybe you've never thought of the idea of using a sinking fund or a bucket because you've never talked to someone who's had that idea before. That's why it's so important to talk about money so that we can all do better with money together. And when we start talking about money, we start learning new perspectives, we start learning new ideas and new ways to approach our money. And that can be so helpful. So thank you to everybody for listening, and let's wrap up today's episode next. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Money Talk with Skyler Fleming. Like I said in the beginning, we're smashing listenership records, and that's because of great listeners like you. And if you could please share this episode with one friend, that would help us continue to grow and continue to have more and more money talks. I'm going to reference a lot of links that are in my show notes. Make sure you go check out Kenny's information as well, but also my social media is in the show notes, my email is in the show notes, and my website. A bunch of ways to contact me or Kenny if you wanted to reach out to him with questions about today's episode. But also, if you've noticed over the past few episodes, I've had regular everyday people on the podcast, and I would love to interview you. If you want to come on the podcast, please reach out to me. I'd love to talk about money with you and maybe get to know a little bit more about your story and how you handle money. Are you in a marriage and have a really interesting way of handling money with a spouse? I'd love to talk about it. Are you single and have a way of managing money with roommates where you guys manage your bills and things like that and talk about money? I would love to talk about that on the podcast. So please, if you have a story that you want to share, reach out to me. Or if you know somebody that would be good to interview, set up a connection. I would love to talk to anyone about money. But thank you for listening to today's episode. I'm your host, Skyler Fleming. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to Money Talk with Skyler Fleming. This show is provided for informational and entertainment purposes and may not be specific to your unique situation. Please be sure to do additional research before making any financial decisions.